So I'm back with another video, and today I'm starting a new series of microservices. And in this video I will be explaining what is microservices, like basically what are microservices, when and why we uses the microservices, and what are the major differences of between the microservices and monolithic architecture. And then after that, like what are the disadvantages of microservices. We'll try to cover in the short video, but let's main our focus is that I will try to explain it in with the short content, but in a more detailed manner. So basically, you have heard the term about microservices. Basically, microservices nothing is if I say you in the short term that it is a architecture which compromises of multiple services in it, and which are doing the communication between the services. If they are doing the communication, either there are two ways of communication in microservice architecture. One is synchronous and another one is asynchronous. So let's get started in the detailed way. And before that, like if you haven't liked, share and subscribe my channel, please like, share and subscribe my channel. So microservices architecture is a way of designing software systems as a collection of small, independent and loosely coupled services. So their main motive is that the services may be small, and but they will be independent of each other. Suppose for example there is a service called user service, payment service and order service, and they will not be dependent on each other. So that's why they are independent, and so therefore they are loosely coupled. And you are aware that loosely coupled services, or if you are doing the dependency injection also, so they are loosely coupled. So one class is not like independent on the another one. Similarly here, one service is not dependent on the another one. So that is the main motive of microservices architecture. Before that, like earlier, we most of the companies nowadays also, they are using the monolithic architecture in their projects according to requirement. But most of the companies which are very big companies, or they are having the large applications, suppose for example Netflix, Amazon, so they are using the microservices. And so that is the main motive. And apart from this, like nowadays they are moving to AI also. So in microservices also they are using the AI integration, and for that AI integration, and basically what they are doing it, they are basically that AI is helping how that suppose if any service is not responding well, so what we have the microservices that they scale up the services. So AI is predicting that this service may go down. So that according to its prediction, it is giving the notification to the developer that this service may go down. So it is very useful also. That so that's why in microservices also in Spring Boot they are integrating AI. So apart from this, like each service focus on a single business capability. As I mentioned, example user service, payment service and order service. Services communicate with each other. There are two ways for communication in microservices. One way is synchronous communication and another way is asynchronous communication. So for synchronous communication, we are having the REST API gRPC, and for asynchronous, we are having the message queues like RabbitMQ, Apache Kafka. Then third point is each service can be developed, deployed and scaled independently. In short, instead of having one large application, you can break into smaller autonomous services. So that is the main advantage. That suppose if you say the advantage that suppose in the future you want to scale the user service and you are doing any changes, suppose in user service, but you do not want to affect the payment service or order service. So rest both service will still work, but user service will be down for some time. So that is the main advantage. And before microservices, there was different architectures. Like there was monolithic architecture, then there was SOA architecture, which is service oriented architecture. But mostly companies are following the monolithic architecture, as SOA architecture was very costlier, and in SOA like UI was decoupled from the backend architecture. So that's why most of the companies are using the monolithic still. But from monolithic also they are migrating to microservices, or they have migrated to microservices, or they are following the microservices architecture from starting, which I mentioned. Suppose for Netflix or Amazon, as they are a large or complex application, so that's why they are using microservices architecture. So this is done. You can answer it for like what are microservices to the interviewer, suppose if anyone asks you. Then second point is our main motive is for making the videos that like we are not going with what is, we are also covering when and why is. Like if you have watched my Spring Boot video also, in there also I've mentioned like why or when we are using the Spring Boot. This is the important question from the perspective of the interview also, like when and where, why we are using the microservices. So when to use: for large complex application that need frequent changes, and applications requiring higher scalability, example e-commerce, banking, streaming platforms, etc. Then third point, systems where different teams work on different modules, applications that need high availability and fault isolation. So all these points, if you go for the example for Netflix or Amazon, so they are a huge application, so they require frequent changes, maybe because suppose for example they are in nowadays like festive season is coming, so they may be having the festive sale. So for some time they need a frequent change, so that's why they are using the microservices, and they are requiring the higher scalability also, and different teams are working on the different modules, and applications that need high availability and fault isolation also. So that is why we went to use the microservices for the complex application which require high scalability, and which also requires high availability and fault isolation. So fault isolation, if you are not aware, fault isolation is the term. Suppose if any service is going down, so after some time when the service is proper running up, so it should be responding to other services also. So that is the fault isolation application we achieve in the microservices or in the cloud area. So why we use it now, the another term is why we use the microservices: for scalability, for faster development and deployment, for technology flexibility, for fault isolation, and for easier maintenance. Like easier you can scale it, or faster developer you can do it, and you can do the technology flexibility, fault isolation you can do it, and easier to maintenance also you can do it. Then example, I am not going in much detail here. Example to understand that there is a e-commerce platform, for example. So in monolithic architecture, what was the problem? That it was a single application which is containing, suppose e-commerce platform is there, so it is containing all the application like user login also, product catalog also, orders, payment, notification. So what was the disadvantage? Suppose if the payment is having the any bug or any error is there, and you must so what we need to do, you will be redeploying the whole application. If the traffic increases only in orders, you need to still scale the entire app, waste of resources. But in microservices you can break into separate services: user service, product service, order service, payment service, and notification service. So if payment service fails, so the rest will work. If the order is experiencing high traffic, the only service can be scaled. And real world example, as I told you, that Netflix, Amazon, Uber, so the application which is having the frequent change, which are a complex application, all of the applications are using the microservices architecture. In summary, if I say you, monolithic is good for the small apps. So interviewer can ask like why we are using the monolithic, because where the application is not much large or which doesn't require the frequent change, so there we are using the monolithic architecture. But microservices we are using for large scalable flexible application, though comes with added complexity. Then the next point is constant cons or challenges of microservices or disadvantages of microservices. If everything if anything is ever all the advantages, so that thing is also having the disadvantages also. So disadvantages: increased complexity, means a monolithic is one code base, microservices mean dozens or even hundred of small services, requires service discovery, load balancing, API gateway monitoring, harder for new developer to understand the whole system. Like it is having the service discovery, many other components are there which I'll be explaining in further series: load balancing, API gateways, monitoring. So it increases the complexity for the new developers which are not aware about much microservices, or they haven't worked on microservice architecture. Then database management and consistency: in monolithic, one database asset transactions are easy, but in microservices each service can have its own database according to requirement. Transaction that span across multiple services, placing an order touches order service plus payment service plus inventory service, need event driven pattern or saga to ensure consistency. Yeah, that is correct. Like if it is having the multiple services and it is having like transactions are there which is integrating all the three services, like suppose order service, payment service, and inventory service, so there it will be needing the event driven patterns or saga pattern to ensure the consistency of the data. So in event driven we are using the, suppose we are using the saga pattern, there is the option, or we will try to achieve with the asynchronous communication via event driven architecture, so that is possible. Then deployment and DevOps is also a override in microservices. Multiple services, multiple pipelines will be there. CI/CD configuration versioning will be there. Requires a strong DevOps culture and tools. And then fourth point, communication overhead. Services talk over the network, like network calls are slower also sometimes. Must handle latency, retries, failures, security, and everything you need to be like handled in all the services. Like security is the major part in the microservices. If you are developing this microservices or following the microservice architecture in monolithic, it is very easy because it is a single application. But in microservices, you need to take care of the security of each and every service. Then fifth point is testing is harder in microservice because each and every services you need to test, and integration testing across many services is very challenging. Need mock services, contract testing, and end-to-end pipelines. Then sixth point, deployment and monitoring. Like every service need to be monitored. Like we will not be aware, suppose if payment service goes down, so we are not aware like whether it is payment service it is giving the error, or order service it is giving the error, or user service it is giving the error in microservices. So how we can do it? Via distributed tracing, via Jaeger or Zipkin servers are there. You need to proper log this, use the loggers everywhere in all the services, and via trace ID and info ID you can easily trace it in the Zipkin server which service it is giving the error. Monitoring is harder since failure may cascade across multiple services. Yeah, monitoring is harder because you will not be aware like which service is going to fail down. Then there are some best practices for microservices I have covered, like domain driven design, independent databases, API gateway, centralized monitoring and logging, automation, resilience patterns, and scalability with containers. Means domain driven design break services around business capabilities. This is a good practice that you need to like order service you need to create suppose, and not the database service. Then independent database, like each service can have its own database according to requirement, which avoids the tight coupling. Also API gateway for which is the entry point for all the services, and it handles routing, security, rate limiting. These all things I will be covering in detail in my further lectures. Then centralized monitoring and logging, as I mentioned, we are using the distributed tracing plus centralized log to track the request across all the services. Then the automation, strong CI/CD pipelines for faster reliable deployments. Then for resilience patterns, we are using the circuit breaker patterns. Like earlier we were using the Hystrix, nowadays resilience 4J library is there for circuit breaker patterns. Circuit breaker pattern, what it does, suppose if one of the services are not responding well, so to avoid the failure, it calls some another service or some static response, basically it returns. So that's why it is not a good impression that if your service is not responding, so your another service will also impact. So that's why we give some static response or some retries, and after sometimes like if the service is responding well, so we give the retries, and if it is able to respond well, then again it is started working. So that's how circuit breaker pattern works, and it is a good practice for making the application resilience. Then scalability with containers, use Docker and Kubernetes for service orchestration. Summary, and another one I have covered, that my monolithic good for small apps, simple deployment, or poor scalability and maintainability as a system grows. Similar one which I have mentioned earlier also. Then microservices good for large complex systems, scalability, team autonomy, but comes with the operational complexity. So monolithic is good for the smaller application. Just have a learn about this, that where the frequent changes are not required and it is a small application, so there monolithic architecture is preferred. But if it is a large application and frequent changes are required, like every day or every week or every month, so there we go for the microservices. So that is the major difference between monolithic and microservice architecture. And microservices is having its some disadvantage also, which I mentioned, like testing is the disadvantage. That's it from my side. Yeah, thanks, bye.